All right. Today I think it's 11 p.m. 11:35, May 2nd, 2016. My name is James Paul Jakubczyk, and I'm experimenting and analyzing and my work I do with my essay, Jakubczyk's Triangle, and the phenomena of optic illusion and the optic phenomena of human eye, the perception, and I came to the conclusion that bending and stretching are two significant factors that I'm walking up and down the kitchen, you might hear some noises. That bending and stretching are two major principles or factors that gives the optical phenomena or the optical illusion of perceiving something with your optics. The stretching occurs on the objects you're looking at it. That's what I would put in order, that stretching is related to the object, what you're looking at. And the bending is the area or the field, or by bending it could be any layer. It could be any layers, whatever you bend, paper, even the hemisphere, the sky hemisphere, which is actually my goal, or is my, which is going to lead at that. So any layer, it doesn't matter if it has to be flexible so you can bend it. So the layer can be invisible, it can be visible, but it has to be bendable. That's very important. And so this is, by the way, actually my first audio recording, because I think audio recording is sometimes easy or much handy to handle. So I did some calculations over there on my kitchen wall, and it's just pencil writing, so I can erase it. That's easy. So to make the experiment is that you have to have a mirror, and this is something very, very interesting, the mirror. So what I have is a flexible, bendable mirror to use it experiment. But I think the flexible mirror, bendable mirror is I think the perfect copy, the perfect replica of the nature of our optical perception in our environment, and when we look up in the sky, etc. So you have to have a bendable, flexible mirror, and what you have to do is, your starting position is your nose. So you hold the mirror in front of your nose and keep it between the mirror and your nose around 6 inches, right? And that's the rest position. That's the rest position, and the reason why I say rest position is, first of all, as I mentioned on previous videos, you always represent 180 degrees. You are 180 degrees. That's very important that you know that you always are 180 degrees. Now, you keep that mirror in the distance from your nose apart around like 6 inches. And the mirror is also in a rest position, which is 180 degrees as well. Now, you start now the process. You keep that 6 inches, and what you do now is you see all these objects in the mirror, right? So what you do right now is, and what you have to know, according to the mirror, is actually that what you see in the mirror is everything that is behind you, meaning everything that is beyond the 180 degrees, right? Very important to know. What you see in the mirror is reflecting what is behind you 180 degrees, and you are the 180 degrees. You represent the 180 degrees wherever you stand, lay down or above, left or side, it doesn't matter. You always represent the 180 degrees. So with the mirror, allows you to see things that is beyond the 180 degrees. You cannot look in the stationary mode behind the 180 degrees. So what you need is to see everything that is behind you, that is beyond the other side of the 180 degrees. You need an optical sense of an optical, or the properties, characteristics, optical layer, that you can see it in front of your eyes without moving, without making rotation to the back and look what is behind you. So that's what a mirror is. It's a reflection. Everything what you see in the mirror is a reflection that you can normally not see because it's behind the 180 degrees line. So as I said, you keep the mirror in a rest mode, which is also 180 degrees, and you keep it from your nose away around 6 inches, a little bit less or more, you got to figure it out, but approximately 6 inches. And it's in the beginning start mode, it's 180 degrees, just like you. And if you do the summary, is actually if you put the 180 degrees, which are you representing, and the mirror in the rest mode is also representing 180 degrees, but as a square, a parallel line to you. But if you try to close it, is an interesting thing that it becomes actually a 360 degrees, which represents our planet Earth, right? Or any other planets, or whatever is a sphere or a circle. So anyway, so what you do now, keep it in rest mode, is 100, and you keep it 6 inches away from your nose, a little bit less or more. And the start mode, beginning mode, is the rest mode, which is the 180 degrees. What you do now, you hold with both hands on each side of the mirror. The mirror has to be flexible, bendable. We talked about it. That you hold with your left hand, the left side of the mirror, and with your right hand, the right hand of the mirror, but you keep the distance as well, the 6 inches, a little bit less, a little bit more. You've got to figure it out from your nose. Now what you do now, you bend the mirror with what you do is you bend the mirror outwardly, which means the hands coming towards you. So you bend the mirror actually away from you, but your hand wrist is you. Hold on, let me think real quick. Okay, what you do is bend the mirror away from you, but keep both hands on each side and bend it away from you, right? That you have around an angle of 120 degrees, 130 degrees, 125 degrees, right? So now you hold that 120, approximately 120 degrees mirror bent. And what I also think is what I figured out, I think that bend is actually speed, velocity. I think bending is velocity itself. We have speed that needs acceleration, but I think speed itself exists already when it's bent. So bending represents, in my investigation, my essay, my theory, that bending, something is bent, is already speed. It's a different kind of a speed, but it's speed. Bending itself is speed and has nothing to do with speed, acceleration. So everything what is bent is, you have to see it, it is already speed involved into it. So you keep the approximately 120 degrees bent 6 inches away from your nose, bent, and now you move slowly. Wait a minute. When you have the approximately 120 degrees bent the mirror, you see that the objects in the mirror become stretched out. It becomes stretchy. It becomes like if you have one single object, it stretches out, that it goes from one side to the other side of the mirror. So it's stretching, the form becomes, there is no order, and by order I mean a form of a triangle, a form of a square, a form of a rectangle. It becomes formless. So you see, you will recognize that all the objects disappear in kind of like a formless, blurry experience, which I also represent. That's the experience of high-speed velocity, what people like the astronauts or when the rocket launches into space, etc. This is a kind of a feeling when objects, because of this high-speed velocity, which is in the same time bending itself represents high-speed velocity. It's another speed. It's an add-on natural speed when something is bent. That you become an optical illusion phenomena by bending that objects that's stretched out in the mirror is a kind of experience when you whatever you race 200 miles or let's say 2 miles along the straightened street, and all the objects you can recognize them all because it's so fast that everything looks like formless. Everything becomes a line. And I think a line or an edge or a corner can be also used, therefore, to become a form back again. So when I say a line is something that is a manifestation of a high-speed velocity. And bending is also a manifestation already as a high-speed velocity. Now what we have in our mind is when we say high-speed velocity, we think when we're sitting in an automobile or everything what drives and fly or rocket launch, this is all high-speed velocity. But I think that high-speed velocity already exists as a manifestation itself, which is a line, which is the bending itself. Everything that is bent already in an object or in the sky or whatever layer in the sky, in the nature, in the sky hemisphere, in the space, everything that is curved is already a manifestation of speed that existed before we invented speed in automobile and planes, etc. And I want to add a note to it real quick, that our mind is not to comprehend, our mind cannot comprehend the infinity and the eternity. That's why we think it's a curved space, but it's actually not. And that's the optical phenomenon illusion. So anyway, back to my experiment. So when you keep the approximately 120 degrees, you bending the mirror outwardly away from your eyes in around 120 degrees, you see that the objects in the mirror becomes stretched. It stretches out. It stretches out the whole view of field, the perception. So instead of when you let's say you see one object in the mirror, that object becomes the mirror. or when you have 4 or 5 objects in a mirror and you stretch them, they all get stretched out and looks like a blurry, like a colorful, stretched out, formless colors when you paint. So now, in around 11 inches, hold on a second, let me measure it real quick, because we have already a measure from the nose to the rest mode of 6 inches. So if you have the mirror in approximately 120 degree away from your nose, around 11 inches from your nose, and it's in the 120 degree bending mode, the object will stretch totally on the mirror, in the mirror, so the objects become formless and you feel an optical process going on in your eyes and your brain and your mind. So you become an optical feeling of a blurry, because the objects are stretched. This is something what I think we cannot perceive when something is stretched or when something is bent for some reason. So it becomes blurry. So when you keep the 120 degrees, approximately 11 inches, and you keep the distance further away from you, what happens is that the objects, because it's now everything, the object itself, let's just go from one object in the mirror. So what happens is the objects get stretched and stretched and stretched and stretched out, and the further the distance away from your nose, I have here it's a crucial point, 18.5 inches away from your nose, and if you keep it at 120 degrees and you're away 18.5 inches away from your nose, what happens is the object tries to break apart. It's the particle is going to break apart, and the object becomes, because the object was first stretched out, it stretches out so that it becomes formless. And if you keep further distance away from your eyes, it becomes then 3. It seems like that there is a correction taking place on optical visual perception, and it's approximately about 18.5, 19 inches away from your nose. When you have it in around 120 degrees bent, the mirror away from you, and it's bending like a half, almost a half oval form, and you have it 18.5 inches away from you, the object tries to become 3 because you stretch it so much out before the 18.5 inches, right, that it creates out of this formless, it's first 1, then it becomes stretched and bent, and then it comes the point, which is 18.5 inches, it tries to become 3. And this is where your optic perception is a crucial point, where it seems like that you have to make a correctness and adjustment that you see it again as 1. And that is by bending. So about around 18.5 inches, the object becomes blurry. It tries to become 3 objects, and you automatically focus on the middle one. Always in the middle one, automatically. I don't know why it is like this, but it seems, even if we have 2 eyes, it always seems like that we always want to focus on one object. Now, adjustments are necessary in correctness to become 1 object at that distance, which is 18.5 inches away from your nose, and it was bent in 120 degrees, and now you have to make adjustments. And I think, hold on, let me check this out. I think you have to bend it more than 120 degrees. So there's a correctness and you see it back again as one object. Hold on a second. Okay, I just did the experiment again. So if you reach 18.5 inches away from your nose and you still have it at 120 degrees, bend the mirror away from you. So it becomes almost a half, maybe a quarter of a half oval. It becomes then, the object in the mirror tries to become 3 objects, but somehow our eyes are focused always on to see one object for some reason, and maybe that's very interesting to go into it in another experiment. But now what happens is, because you will see 3 and it gives a blurry feeling on your optical perception, you do adjustments and correctness, and the correctness and adjustments is when you bend it more. So everything that goes over 120 degrees, it seems like you're correcting your perception to become back to one object, but you keep that distance, which is 18.5 inches. So I figured out that, so I come to the conclusion that bending and stretching are, I think, are the principles, or the two main. Bending and stretching and distance are those 3 main. They're like brothers and sisters and cousins. Those are the 3 main factors for optical phenomena and optical illusion and optical perception. And I think that something that is curved or bending itself is a manifestation or represents on its own that there is high speed velocity in that bending object, or in that bending layer, or in that bending hemisphere, or in that bending space. It is by itself already a high speed velocity. I also think that that what happens, that how can I say that to make it okay, that wherever, what is really interesting is that between you and the object, so let me make first clear, my first conclusion is that bending and stretching are high speed velocity already. It's a manifestation of that process. So the result of high speed velocity is bending and stretching. Those 2 words represent high speed velocity by itself, apart from the high speed velocity we know from automobiles or airplanes or trains or rockets or anything that is running or whatever. So this is a different kind of speed. This is, I think, an additional speed. And that my second thing is that you always represent 180 degrees. It doesn't matter on which side you stand, on the left side, on the right side of the line, or on the wall. If you lay down flat, if you hang on the ceiling looking down, you always represent 180 degrees. So I think the 180 degrees should be a mathematical, fundamental, mathematical principle to create an equation, the 180 degree. what I also figured out is that between your nose and approximately 19 inches, 20 inches, the distance between your nose, your eyes, and the 18 and the 20, let's round it up, like 20 inches between your nose and 20 inches between the distance between your nose and 20 inches. There's a lot of stuff going on in optical perception. There's a lot of optical perception going on, especially when something is bent or stretched. So I think that if you, according to my experiment on a bending mirror, is that a mirror, if you look in a mirror, it gives you the opportunity, or it gives you the perception what goes beyond you, behind you, beyond the 180 degrees, beyond the line, beyond that which you cannot see. But through that mirror, the mirror can represent everything, any layer. It can be replaced as space, as the sky, whatever, but it has to be bendable, movable in degrees, which is actually our planet Earth. And excuse me. So when you bend it from a rest point, so when you look in a mirror, you always look from 180 degree to another 180 degree point of view. So when you start bending smaller than 180 degree, which means it's getting curved or it's getting bent, when it goes under 180 degree, which is approximately 120 degree, what happens in the object in the mirror, which is actually the object behind you, behind the 180 degree, behind the observer, or behind the line, beyond the line, or the other side of the line, is that those things is in the beginning a replica, a copy, and when you bend it in 120 degrees, approximately, the object begins to stretch out. And by stretched out, I mean it tries to completely fill out the view, what you perceive. So it becomes kind of like when you paint something with all kind of colors, but it's formless. You don't see any form, it's just different colors. It's like when you see the sunrise, excuse me, when you see the sunrise and you see all the beautiful colors, they come along in the very beginning. This blue, orange, white, violet, green, and all that stuff. The nice sky, sky dancing. When you see when the sunrise goes up, the beautiful colors in the sky, the different colors, but it has no form. It feels like that's what happened to the object. Disappears, or that's what happens by bending the object. But that don't mean that the object is in reality bent, but it's bending in the perception. So, and when you hold 120 degrees and you hold it in that position, in that angle, and you keep just a distance more and more away from you, you become an optical feeling of blurry, like the recognition. It's something is going on in your perception, and it's so hard to grasp, to focus on one thing, on one particle, on one object, because it's stretched out, and it tries, as you keep further the distance, the stretched object breaks in 3, or it breaks in 2, because it cannot hold no more the bending, the high-speed velocity. I think it's the reason why they always talk about there's high-speed process that we can break speed or matter, or speed of light, etc. But I think that everything is light already. So by bending it, and you keep the distance further and further, the distance is actually that needs a correctness. Because when it tries to become 2 or 3, the object in the mirror, in the optical perception, there is a kind of a blurry feeling in your optical perception, and it feels like there needs to be a correctness, adjustment, and you can do this correctness and adjustment only by bending it more. So it becomes more into I would say, it becomes more into, from 180 degree, it becomes more into a 90 degree. And that's also interesting part, because wherever you look in your surroundings at home, or when you go outside in the city, or whatever, you always see this 90 degree angle everywhere, especially when you are in any room. You see always this 90 degree angle. You see a line at a 90 degree angle, and most of the time you always are in a room which represents a square or a cube, but it has always those corners which is always representing a 90 degree angle. So that's very interesting. So where was I? Where were I? Okay, so I think that this, when you have it in 120 degree, and you keep the distance further away from you by keeping the 120 degree, you become an optical, crucial, blurry feeling in perception, because the eye cannot recognize something. And I think that crucial point is what happens if we look up in the sky. So that crucial status, which the eye feels like blurry, it cannot recognize nothing, everything is stretched out, everything is bent, that is when you look up in the sky. It doesn't matter if it's daytime or nighttime. So I think that on a certain level, when you go up in the sky, on a certain distance, something is breaking the optical perception. And you can do then anything in that field, in that range of this blurry perception, in this blurry field. You can operate in this blurry field in the hard optical perception. You can do anything in that area without your eye is recognizing it. So anything anybody can do whatever they want to do in that crucial era, in that certain area. And yeah, so that's what I think. I think everything in a certain distance, if you stay on the Earth and you look up at a certain distance, your optical perception will no more capable to perceive anything, because everything disappears, or the optical perception phenomenon cannot grasp it, and which is, I would say, the sky and then all above. So they can do anything up there without our perception, what is really up there or what is really going on there. And because on that crucial point where everything becomes like approximately 120 degree, from my small experiment, I don't know how it is in the nature experiment, is that if you're in a distance, we have to do when I do it for my nose and I reach out 18.5 inches away from my nose in a 120 degree angle, in that range, my eyes cannot perceive the object correct, and it feels like dizzy, blurry feeling in the optical perception. And I think that status in that area is our sky, our space hemisphere, which we cannot just perceive, or which we cannot perceive, because we need a correction up there. At that point where it's 85 inches, there has to be done something like an adjustment or correctness, because the object's trying to become 2, or it tries to become 3. So when it becomes 3, it tries always to grasp that thing that is in the middle. And if you break it more apart, it becomes then 2. So all that things happens, I think, in the sky or in the heaven, in space, etc. And that should be really worth to investigate it more. So I know it was a long essay about my experiment while I'm doing it right now, but I think it's very important to have that. So that's being said, all right, that's my first deeper experiment about bending and stretching in a mirror. It really feels like, I call it all the safe. I call it the man in the mirror. The man. I know there's a song, "The Man in the Mirror," but I call it also the man in the box. It's like we are always in a box, and we cannot get out of the box because our perception. So it's very interesting. So I think, to just summary everything together, which is first, I think any line, whatever line you see in your environment, at home, it doesn't matter. Everything that represents a line, it's already a manifestation of a high-speed velocity. Anything that is bent or stretched, everything that is bent also is representing a high-speed manifestation velocity in itself. And stretching is the distance, which means when you stretch something, it becomes a line, which we see everywhere. And if we stretch it more out in that bending position, then it becomes 2. So bending itself is high-speed velocity already, is a manifestation that already exists without us. That bending represents and is a manifestation of a high-speed velocity that is manifested in that bending. Secondly is that stretching, everything that is stretched, which obviously we recognize it as a line or as an area or as a layer, becomes formless, becomes in a certain point formless, and it becomes a line. And I think when it becomes a line, we can use it for equations for geometry. Then the bending itself can be anything that is bendable. So any layer you can bend, any layer you can form that it turns out in a bending form, can be anything. It can be also air, it can be also the sky, it can be also the space, whatever. Every layer that you can bend, visible and non-visible, represents already a manifestation of a high-speed velocity. So actually, it's like this. I think that we always walk in an area, we always are surrounded by bending things. It's always bending. Whatever you do, whatever you look, up in the sky, your environment, everything is bent and everything is stretched. And because of this bending and stretching, I think that was the reason why we have created geometry, to create out of bending and stretching geometrical objects or forms, like a triangle, like a square, like a rectangle, that we can objectively, that we can optical perceive the environment. So that's being said, that's my first audio. This is James Paul Jakubczyk, May 2nd, 2016.